Yes, since I took over at the helm of the EIB 1st of January, I've been engaging very actively with our shareholders, the EU member states, also with key stakeholders, to identify what are the priorities going forward. We had a very good discussion with finance ministers in February and another one last week. And I think we have quite identified how to make the most of the EIB, the financial arm of the EU, that has a key role to play in supporting investment and maybe even a greater role to play going forward.
It feels as though there's a lot of soul searching going on across Europe at this point, trying to think about what these organisations, what these institutions should look like for the future. When it comes to the role of EIB, there are calls for you to wade into defence, to change your policies so Europe can find the funds to ramp up defence production, fund weapons, for instance. Should EIB stray into this area?
Well, actually, the EIB has been funding and supporting Europe's security and defence industry for the past 8 years, and we had
weapons, right?
No, indeed. But we had a very good discussion last week with finance ministers precisely to see how we can step up this support, looking into the definition of dual use, support to SMEs, also how to fast track and be more efficient in supporting and cooperating with other key institutions, European and beyond. And I think that we have a quite good action plan that we're going to be deploying in the coming weeks, which should enable the EIB to play the role it should in supporting Europe's security and defence, which is one of the key challenges now. But this should not at all compete or drive our attention away from our top priority, which is consolidating our brand as the climate bank, as well as supporting all the other priority areas for Europe.
One of the hurdles cited to the challenge of financing defence to a greater extent was that it could impact EIB's top-notch credit rating. Is that still a concern?
Well, we have been calibrating very carefully this action plan, listening to players in the industry, also in the financial sector, as well as our key shareholders. And so far, what we see is that we had an issuance this week, 5 billion euros issuance of 5-year bonds, and which was heavily oversubscribed. There were 21 billion euros in demand, and we closed only 10 basis points over the US Treasury. So I think so far the market is clearly meeting our expectations.
One of the messages from the IMF has been that there are a huge amount of different fiscal items for countries to deal with from here, and that is defence, it's health, it's social, it's education. And the priorities keep on growing effectively, and without support from other different institutions, it might be difficult to consolidate fiscally to sort of hit the targets that are required to reduce debt. Does that mean there is a greater role for EIB more broadly, trying to help out European nations?
Well, that is indeed one of our key strengths. I mean, with a 600 billion balance sheet, AAA plus, as you were saying, top-notch rating, very strong capital position. We have around 32% core tier 1 capital ratio, and very strong portfolio, very balanced and strong asset portfolio. I think the EIB is in a very good position to contribute to closing the EU's investment gap. And indeed, the needs are huge. We're talking about the climate transition, we're talking about digitalization and new technologies, also cohesion policy, social investment you referred to, and also EU activities around the world, investments outside the EU. And all that will require the EIB to put to the test and put to the maximum its capacity to mobilize private investment and leverage national and the EU budget.
You mentioned green tech before. Let me ask you about funding nuclear projects. It's something that's been hinted at. Nuclear was rolled back in the wake of the Fukushima nuclear disaster, real reset globally in terms of how we thought about nuclear. But what does it bring now? Why is it an option for Europe?
Well, obviously, we have to support all those key technologies that can support the green transition. And the EIB Group has been doing so. Actually, in this area, we have been investing in the fuel cycle, security, R&D. I think Europe cannot stay away from key technologies that will be maybe quite significant in the future. And that is our approach as the financial arm of the EU. The green transition should be our top priority. It's probably the challenge of our generation. And I'm not only thinking about the interest of future generations and the youngest in our societies, but today's competitiveness, today's sustainable growth, and also our strategic autonomy as Europeans, as we painfully have learned after Russia's attack against Ukraine.
Is Europe on track to hit its green goals, or is some of it just out of your control? For instance, there are different reports from investment banks citing the lack of take-up of EVs. Is there much you can do about this if there is fading demand for one area of green tech?
Well, the technology development is actually outpacing expectations. So I think that the technologies are coming onto the market faster than maybe we would have anticipated. And what we need is to support the take-up and the scaling up of these technologies so that they also become affordable. This is one of the top priorities for us going forward, how to ensure that not only the large players and not only innovative and highly risky projects are supported by the EIB, as we're doing these days, from circular battery production to solar panel production, but also that we support SMEs in scaling up these technologies, which will bring a more energy efficient economy. They are at the heart of Europe's economy, and we really need to ensure that it is the whole economy, all sectors, all regions that can benefit from the efficiency enhancing features of this green transition.